The question is, the bill be read a second time. The Honourable Dr Brian Walker.
Thank you, Acting President. I really wanted to give you a different perspective as to my view as to this bill. Now, I take on board everything that's been said, and I greatly praise the speeches here by the Honourable Peter Collier and my colleague, the Honourable Dr Brad Pettit. But there are a few things I think you need to be made aware of. First of all, this idea that we're dealing with children, and we're not. I would challenge anyone here to stand up to one of these young offenders that are charging at you with violence in their minds to actually feel safe and secure. You're not dealing with children. They're adult size, maybe young in years, maybe mentally not there. But from the physical point of view, I would not care to be standing in their way. And these are young people who are very adept at leading the even younger further down the paths they should not be going. And so I think it's right and proper to take every care not to downplay what's actually going on. But we're also needing, and I'll reinforce what my colleague had said here, the evidence-based response is needed. And another criticism I'll make here, and I'll make this of the government benches and also the opposition benches, because you're both the same, is that you are dealing with the end problem, not the original problem. I learned in my childhood a stitch in time saves 9. Or prevention is better than cure. Look, these were ancient things we learned. The first fleet recognised coming out here, if the rope is fraying, replace it or you'll lose the sail. A stitch in time saves 9. Or to put that into more clinical context here, if we were to treat every homeless person with a place to live, the costs would be less than treating homelessness. And yet still we refuse, on both sides of the House, to actually house people who are unhoused. And the costs, of course, are there. And somehow we're going to blame the homeless people for that. So these ancient aphorisms, which we learned in our childhood, reflect an ancient wisdom, do they not? And I go back to the first fleet. And that brings me to remind you of the fact that the first fleet was here because of our punitive approach to crime. A 15-year-old stealing bread because they're hungry, they're starving, and someone stealing bread and ends up not being hanged, but being sent out to Australia, far from home and family, to endure horrible conditions. And I do think it's pretty good of our government on both sides to be honouring these ancient traditions by emulating them in our modern-day life. Now, you know I'm being facetious. You know I'm being actually satirical in that. But this is what we are basically doing. We are reflecting an ancient predisposition to punishing, and we're thinking that's going to be doing something to reverse the changes we're seeing in our society. And has it ever worked? I challenge you to name me a society where that has worked. You could say, quite reasonably, the best way of actually removing the problem is to execute everyone who's a criminal. We did that for quite some considerable time, did we not? But I would yet to find anyone here supporting that approach to reducing the crime in our streets. Thank God. So the ancient wisdom of a stitch in time saving 9, wisdom. We've actually got here the stable door, and we're looking at the horse which is bolted and wondering what we're going to do about it. The horse has gone. We've got transgenerational problems now, which it will take generations to fix. And it will not be a quick fix. And this bill, and I have to praise the government, it's nice that you're actually doing something to maybe ameliorate the conditions, but you're not actually addressing the underlying problems. And I would direct this to both sides of the House. We need to address the underlying, foundational, functional issues. This bill is administrative. It's trying to close the stable door. When I was visiting with my crossbench colleagues the facilities in Banksia Hill and Casuarina, I was asked, OK, Brian, what would you do? And I asked it, well, when do you think we should start teaching these young people that the way they're going is wrong? Because we looked at the education within Banksia Hill and the teachers struggling to get education into people who had never visited school with any regularity whatsoever. How can we begin the education or the re-education of these people, these young people, sorely deficient in all manner of education, apart from how to stay alive and keep themselves amused? And the answer I gave was quite simple. We start before birth. That's when we start. So let me tell you from the perspective of someone who's watched this face to face with the conditions, as I have worked in the Kimberley and the Pilbara and other parts of our great country, even in the wheat belt, when I've seen these conditions at first hand and dealt with them or tried to. So my experience of young offenders, having worked in Banksia Hill, which I don't think many of you here have done, having worked actually in Banksia Hill as a doctor, trying to fix the problems they were dealing with, I can tell you that what we did there was basically putting a bandage on a very festering problem. Showing respect to the young people in the prison was a great way of ensuring their cooperation. And a colleague of mine, a very senior colleague in the department who is also working in Banksia Hill, said he's never yet had a problem with that. The prison officers, with the, let's call it the coercion that they're putting there, the lack of respect for the young criminals in their care, has been very detrimental. They've actually arced up and begun to be protesting at their disrespectful behaviour. You might then say, how should we show respect to someone who's actually been so deficient in respect in the community? Well, someone's got to start somewhere, do we not? Unfortunately, medical practitioners very often are able to show respect. In fact, it's been my experience that people coming in and sitting in front of me who have been less than presentable in polite society have responded marvellously when I've treated them with as much respect as I would to a CEO of a major company. So the schooling in detention is fragmented. I do recall visiting a remote community on the edge of the Great Sandy Desert, and a lovely young boy, he must have been 12 years old, I'm sure I've told the story before, I like telling it, was saying, yes, he's actually in the advanced maths class. 12, great, that's fantastic, I was quite surprised. So I gave him a question, what's 7 times 7? He couldn't give the answer, of course. But he pointed out to some land across a wide stretch of desert, a hill across there, and said, there's good guana across there. He could go across that desert and kill that guana, so he would eat, I would die. So the question here is, what kind of education are we recommending to people who are living in areas such as that? Are we keeping them in contact with their language? Are we keeping them in contact with their culture? I think not. And I said in my inaugural speech that when we lose contact to our language and contact to our culture, we are wandering as ghosts in our own country. And that cannot be conducive to profitable behaviour in society, can it? Let's go a bit further. We've got social issues there, of course. We've got glue sniffing, we've got petrol sniffing, we've got drugs. Now, you may be surprised, as a medical practitioner well known for being a proponent of using cannabis, medically, of course. But the major poison I am seeing in these societies is alcohol. A toxic problem. First of all, for the parents, then throughout the pregnancy, then the FASD, the fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, then the behaviour which is associated with that, continued alcohol, continued drug abuse, all kinds of damage to the brain, the growing brain, on top of an established FASD, which then results in behaviour, which results in early childhood pregnancy, which results in the whole thing being happening again, transgenerational problems. And it strikes me as amazingly stupid that we ban cannabis but permit alcohol and allow the damage to continue, because the lesser problem is somehow banned. You end up in prison for this. You end up with contact with the police. But the alcohol, no, fine, that's legal, off you go. Are we not in the least bit ashamed that we allow this to continue? Are we not in the least bit concerned that we are part of the problem? And we are. Then I'm reminded, standing one day in ED, I'll not tell the area, it was Western Australia, and a young mother, 16-year-old, brought in a child, 6 months old. And the child, ED of course, was complaining. Well, the child wasn't complaining, the child was vomiting and was fretful and crying. And the mother asked me, what's wrong with my child? Fix it. Bottle-fed baby, not breastfed, bottle-fed. In that bottle, was actually a reasonable quantity of Coke, Coca-Cola. Not milk, not even cow's milk, Coca-Cola. And to eat, it had been given, mind you, it was chopped up, so it wasn't actually big, it had been given to eat the sausage from the local frying house. Sausage and Coke. And the mother asked, "What's wrong with my child?" Now, the mother herself at 16 was an established drug runner. Got to make your money somehow. Learned from a mother who was also in her early 30s, also pretty well established in the drug scene. So, that was some considerable years ago. That child is now of an age where, I don't remember the sex, it's either male or female. And the question is, where is that child now? What's happening to that child right now as a young adult? What? Where is it in our system? Can we guess? Well, let's have a look at what the DCP does. Because the DCP should really be helping the situation at a very early stage. And I do recall, again, another 6-month-old baby, breastfed this time, but drunk, because they'd been drinking the breast milk of a very drunk mother. And that child was now drunk. That infant was drunk. The DCP very kindly said, yes, you keep the patient, you keep the child in the hospital, separate from mum and dad because they're unfit to look after it, and on Monday morning we'll deal with it. What did DCP do on that Monday morning? They gave that child back to the parents, both inebriated, to carry on making that child sick with breastfed alcohol. And where is that child now? And what are we going to do about that? I know. Let's build a bigger prison. Let's build a stronger prison. Incarcerate them. Treat them like we've treated them in the First Fleet. And let's see if we can improve things. Do you not get the anger that comes out of a society which is experiencing what we, in this chamber, currently are doing? Can we excuse ourselves? It's inexcusable incompetence to manage a problem which is destroying society. And this tawdry bill coming on is a half-hearted attempt to fix a few problems administratively. Are we going to pat ourselves on the back? So we're failing at every chance, at every stage in society. Our institutions are failing. I do recall one time when I pointed out, again I've mentioned this to you before, a young girl, she must have been 11, was being increasingly sexually abused by a boy in her class, in school. And when I made the mandatory report that she's at danger of being raped, the DCP wanted to know nothing about the problem. What's the girl's name? The girl was actually trying to learn her lessons, farming girl. It's not her the problem, it's the boy is the problem. We need to get help for the boy. No, the girl's name. I said, it's not her. The boy is the one who is escalating his sexual activity and sexually approaching this young girl with the threat of rape on the horizon. Well, we can't do anything about that. What will it take, I asked the DCP director. I said, what will it take for you to take action with this boy to help remediate his behaviour and get him the help he needs before he becomes a raping child and then a raping adult and entering our prison system as a rapist? The answer she gave was, when he rapes and is in front of the police, then we can do something. Now, the hard-working employees at DCP do not share that mentality. They are burning out at a rate of knots because they see the incompetence of a bureaucratic regime at every level. And we are doing what to fix that? I took it to Parliament, nothing happened. So you can see the anger among the general practitioners who are trying to actually stem this tide, this tsunami of social dysfunction. And I think it's time that we recognised those initially enthusiastic soldiers of the bureaucracy who are falling by the wayside, that we support them by taking positive action to prevent this problem at the very beginning, before birth, and doing something over the next 3 generations, which it will take, to fix the problem that we are allowing to continue.